Hello everyone, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to Ultimate General Civil War. This is part 13 of my Confederate Let's Play, playing through the Grand Campaign on the side of the Confederacy, something I haven't done since the game was in early access. We recently wrapped up a series looking at the entire Union campaign, but the Confederate campaign, my only other attempt, we lost at Antietam and I was fired, and it was when Antietam was actually the last available battle. Now you can fight through the whole war. So that's what we're in the process of doing. Thus far, we've known only success, and we are fighting the Battle of Gaines's Mill. Now, last time around, we weren't discussing the battle itself. We were actually talking about Ultimate General 3, which has been announced in a roundabout way. The developer Game Labs has announced they're planning on working on a Ultimate General 3, and they've asked for feedback from the community to see what people want. Their principal options have been Revolutionary War for the United States or a Napoleonic game looking at the wars of Napoleon. It seems like the majority of you want, based on the previous video, seems like the majority of you are looking forward to a Napoleonic type game. If they do that, I hope they limit it to something along the lines of the Peninsula campaign in Spain, or maybe the Russian campaign, or maybe the German campaign of 1814, with the Battle of Leipzig as sort of the culminating moment. Another interesting option would be the invasion of France, by which point the French army was so small that it really had no chance against the Allies, but which also witnessed some of Napoleon's perhaps least well-known in public history and yet best-regarded campaigns. He won a series of brilliant victories in the defense of France with a very small army against incredibly capable and large enemy forces. But that's not really the point of this video. I was just kind of calling out what the last video was about. I will post a link to the Facebook page where the Ultimate General team is looking for your feedback. My thoughts were a sort of multi-war look of the rise of Prussia or the rise of Germany would be a really interesting game, starting with the Second Schleswig-Holstein War and progressing into the Austrian-Prussian War and the Franco-Prussian War, and resulting in the rise of Germany. In this video, we're going to return to talking about the American Civil War and the battlefield that you see in front of you. So, last time around, we fought the first half of the Battle of Gaines's Mill, which was really mostly just us moving into position here on the Federal right flank. Now, the Battle of Gaines's Mill was fought on June 27th, 1862. It was the third battle in the peninsula, it was the third battle in the 7 days battles, the first being a Union attack near Richmond, the second being a Confederate attempt by Robert E. Lee to get around General McClellan's flank. He had left a large portion of his army north of the Chickahominy River near Richmond, which was being threatened. The Confederate capital was being threatened with basically being captured. The Confederates were within earshot of Confederate church bells as Mass was being called. And the first attempt was an attempt by the Confederates to get around the Federal flank and crush a portion of the Union Army, so the Confederates would be able to even the odds a bit. Lee's basic idea was destroy a third of General McClellan's army of 120,000 men, and then you will have a much more even fight on your hands, considering the Confederates had around 80 to 85,000 men they could bring into battle. The Union had about 120,000 men. If you take out 40,000 Union troops, you're right at even, assuming you don't lose horrible casualties as the Confederacy. That first battle was a failure in the sense that it didn't break the Union lines. General Stonewall Jackson was returning from the valley, severely exhausted and really probably not in a state where he was capable of commanding forces. His troops were late to arrive, the attacks were disjointed, and the Federals threw the Confederates back in that second battle of the 7 days battles, but the first of the Confederate attacks. With that being said, General McClellan was unnerved by the aggressive nature of the Confederates, and he had begun shifting his supplies to the James River. There's some open speculation over whether he was intending officially to retreat the army from the approaches to Richmond, or whether it was a sort of a move in that direction without the full intent going that way. With that being said, the following day, the Union sort of fell back north of the Chickahominy to sort of guard its flank a bit. General Fitzjohn Porter's 5th Corps of the Union Army, some 34,000 men, were deployed north of the river, and basically they waited there for a Confederate attack. or a resumption on the drive on Richmond, as the Union, in many people's eyes, was intending to begin its withdrawal actually already by this point away from Richmond. With that being said, General Lee pounced with 54,000 men. Remember, he had about 85,000 men he could bring to battle, but about 30,000 of them were covering the Federal forces to the front of Richmond, so this was north of Richmond. And he brought about 34,000 men, he brought about 57,000 men to deal with about 34,000 Union troops under General Fitz-John Porter. Fitz-John Porter is one of the martyrs of the American Civil War. He was a not phenomenal, but he was a very capable Union Corps commander. In his limited experience in the Army, he held off an enemy of almost double his number at Gaines's Mill for 7+ hours. He also was instrumental, but he was very aware of the risk at the Battle of Second Manassas of the Confederates flanking General John Pope's army, and in fact, rather than launch a disastrous attack that could have led to the full rout of the Union Army sooner and perhaps more decisively than the actual Second Battle of Manassas was, he more or less refused orders to attack by General John Pope. Now, this action eventually landed Fitz-John Porter in a world of hurt, where he would end up losing his command and his reputation over it, not something that was recovered until after the war, when it was too late. He was cashiered in disgrace after the Battle of Antietam, when General McClellan was removed from command. But the Battle of Gaines's Mill was Porter's sort of shining moment, if you will, holding off against Longstreet, against Ewell, against Jackson, against the core of the Confederate Army. These famous Confederate commanders that would become so well known as very capable and aggressive commanders. He held out for 7 hours against repeated attacks on strong ground against the Confederates. And only the eventual weight of numbers, when Jackson finally got his men into position to attack, a continued repeat of assaults eventually broke his line, largely because General McClellan was unwilling and unable to send substantial reinforcements to Porter. More or less his corps commanders were unwilling to detach their own forces, and the pittance of troops that they did send arrived too late in the evening of June 26th. It's worth noting that even at this point, General Jackson was really not fit to command, and beyond that, in terms of his exhaustion level, and beyond that, his troops got lost on the way to attack. So General Lee had planned this attack. The other Confederate forces got into position. General Jackson's troops went down the wrong road, then spent half the day counter-marching to get back into position. As a result, according to Confederate artillerist and post-war historian Edward Alexander, the Confederate artillery commander at Pickett's charge at Gettysburg, actually, this prevented a more decisive victory. But nonetheless, after hours and hours of attacks, the Union line eventually crumpled and was driven back, and it was the only clear-cut tactical victory for the Confederates in the entire 7 days. But it was enough. It crumpled the Union flank, and if McClellan was not necessarily certain about abandoning the drive on Richmond completely, he had no doubts after the Battle of Gaines's Mill. Now, as you can see here in front of you, what I've been playing out as I've been talking about the battle is I massed my troops on the Union right flank. You could see the Union were dug in all along this line behind earthworks. I massed my troops on the right. I did put a few troops kind of in the center to sort of hold the Union position just in case the AI decided to come out of the trenches. Overwhelmed them on that flank and have driven them down the line of their entrenchments. These sort of stacked logs, if you will, that you can see there represent entrenchments and earthworks that are very difficult to take, and I've driven the Union from their positions. Now, there appear to be Union reinforcements, or at least a secondary line that has come in on my own flank behind the initial Union line, and is threatening me as well. So I've got a couple of batteries of artillery, I've got some skirmishers trying to hold the line against 2 Union brigades of infantry and a couple of, looks like a couple of units of cavalry here that are threatening us. They are, basically, if they drive through here, they'll retake one of the objectives that I've already taken on the northern end of the Union line, and then they can drive into the rear of our flanking force, or drive into the rear of these 2 other brigades I've situated in the woods here on the southern, sort of on the right flank. There's 2 objectives Well, actually, I've taken 2 objectives on the defensive line, but there's one more objective I need to take a little bit further east. I don't have the manpower to do it yet. I'm expecting more reinforcements to come in throughout the day. So you can see here my initial force is sort of contained on the left and southern flank. I've got 2 brigades that are broken off here in wooded terrain fighting against some Federals to try and weaken them so that hopefully we can more easily take this flag to the right. I'm not sure when this battle actually ends. It says an hour 34, but I think there's more time because not all of my forces have deployed yet. But we'll see. You see I've got 2 more brigades coming in here to try and relieve this force in my center. They actually broke one of my artillery batteries, and they sent some of my other troops running. They're moving in here to try and retake this objective. We have 4,000 infantry coming up to, if not stop them from taking the objective, they should, and there you go, we just lost the objective. They should be able to counterattack and drive those Federals back and immediately retake that position with those 4,000 reinforcements. Meanwhile, with these 4 brigades, well, 3 now, I'm detaching 1 to go north. I'm continuing to drive down the Union flank. They have more troops than me in this corner now, but fortunately their troops' morale is low. They've taken heavy casualties, they're on open terrain, and they're not in good position. They're all kind of grouped together so that even if they want to shoot at me, they can only bring a handful of their muskets to bear. Meanwhile, here on the right flank, you can see the Union has charged one of my brigades in this wooded terrain, and they've got more than almost 5,000 troops here against just over 3,200 of our troops. Our troops are on good defensive ground, but the weight of numbers for the Federals certainly is a risk. I'm trying to bring this brigade that's just retaken our objective in the north here, these 2,000 men, into the aid of the 2 brigades I have here down by T.H. Butcher, but there's another Federal brigade near Franklin there that's in our ways. We've got a 2nd brigade north, but I've kind of been trying to drive off Federal cavalry there. Their mobility of their cavalry is a threat that makes things a little bit more difficult. You can see here the Union is charging the Mississippi Brigade, which is exactly what I do not want to happen. I do not want my troops stuck in melee combat with Federal troops that outnumber me. My best chance is staying in the woods, keeping out of melee combat, and continuing to fire volleys into them. The Federals have regained some cohesion. They've got 3 brigades almost down a cohesive firing line down here in this sort of bend in the river, and they've got 1 other brigade firing into our Mississippi Brigade's flank. So we're in a bit of a tight position here. We did drive that 1 brigade back via melee combat, but now we've got the Mississippi Brigade kind of caught between 3 different brigades' fire. I'm charging some cavalry, hopefully into the rear of the Federals down there to disrupt any threat to the Mississippi Brigade's flank. If they've got cavalry coming up their rear, presumably they will not be firing at the Mississippi Brigade's flank. And meanwhile, you can see those reinforcements that I was talking about have begun to arrive. So I do have to take this final Union objective. I don't have the manpower to do it quite yet, but we've got 10 brigades or so, which look like they just showed up on the northern edge of the map that are coming down. The other concern here is with the Union now having a sort of more solid firing line and also moving this brigade Warren here into the woods, they potentially have the opportunity to overwhelm our attacking force and maybe drive back our attacking force as well. We succeeded in rolling up the Union lines, but they've more or less rallied, and if they counterattack, they may have the edge here. They certainly outnumber us on this portion of the battlefield. I have been using a little bit of a gamey tactic in this particular battle, not something I usually use. I tend to be pretty playing it straight, playing it kind of the way I would imagine is somewhat quasi-realistic, which causes me to not necessarily destroy the enemy to the maximum ability. But one of the tactics I have been using in this particular battle, because of the nature of this fight and because of the nature of my weakness early, in order to continue moving the series forward successfully, is you'll see every once in a while when the Union starts to charge one of my troops that are in kind of a bad position where I really don't want to melee, I actually detach some skirmishers, and the game doesn't know how to handle that. So this is a very gamey piece. This is the first time I've ever done it. I don't imagine I will use it in future battles, but just calling that out. If the enemy is charging your troops and you don't care about being realistic, you can just detach some skirmishers off your main line if you haven't already done so, and that will stop the enemy charge in its tracks. The AI doesn't know how to distinguish between charging at the skirmishers, charging the mainline infantry, and they just stop. So one tactic that some people do, and again, this is not something I've ever done, but I kind of got told I should have used in my last battle, is what they'll do is they'll let the Union charge them. Then when the Union troops are out in the open, about to run into their line, but they're in the open, and the Confederates or the defenders are in covered terrain, they'll detach the skirmishers to halt the attacking force in the open while their own troops remain in cover. And then what they do is they go ahead and, because the skirmishers are detached and the enemy stops their charge, now the enemy is stuck in open terrain with no cover, firing at an enemy that's well entrenched or well in cover, and they just get ravaged because they can't close range to fight a melee engagement. Or at least that's what some people do. And that's what yours truly has done a couple of times in this fight. I may do it one or two more times, but I don't envision using this as a tactic moving through the campaign. But that's enough about that. Seems like we're back into driving the Union troops. We've sort of brought one more brigade up to support the Mississippi Rifles. This cavalry brigade of ours, the former, I believe it's Stuart's former brigade before I moved him to another position, is really helping drive the Union back. They're back in disarray and running on the right flank. Meanwhile, or on the left flank. Meanwhile, on the right, our position is stabilized. These two reserve brigades that have come up have really helped kind of hold the Federals off. And frankly, our two brigades that are stuck in the woods there on the extreme right of your screen here are in great cover and inflicting horrible damage on the Union with suffering minimal damage. I mean, they're certainly still getting bled quite a bit, but they're suffering relatively minimal damage compared to the Yankees. Meanwhile, here we've got the Federal line turned again, and they're running despite outnumbering our own troops. They're just suffering too badly. I think this battle is demonstrating the value of superior weapons. I've got all of my first corps, which is the first group of troops that are engaged to this point, is armed with rifled muskets, Enfields, Lorenzes. The worst rifled muskets we have are Mississippi, 1841 Mississippis. Everybody else is toting Enfields or Lorenzes, and then again Mississippis. So I really think in this particular fight we're seeing the benefit of those high quality weapons. The second corps, which is the brand new corps of completely green recruits, is now coming down from the north, and they are armed with more along the lines of smoothbores. But in this case, the idea is hopefully is that numbers will matter more than the quality of their equipment. You can see there the Mississippi Brigade has Mississippis. There's the Enfield Brigade that has Enfields. The Stonewall Brigade also has Enfields, I believe. And I believe the other two brigades, there are call out that they're rifled brigades there as well. So on the sort of southern left portion of the screen, we've had better armed troops there than the Union have had. Meanwhile, our northern troops are now arriving. Our rifled troops, the Orphan Brigade and Lorenz Brigade, have finally pushed the Federals back, who were threatening them. Now they're driving east to try and threaten this objective. I'm going to bring these Napoleon artillery pieces and 3-inch rifles forward a bit as well, hoping that I can get them into canister range behind infantry lines. Cavalry is really effective at, especially Napoleons, at canister range. And if I can get them behind behind infantry lines, I can shield them from direct enemy fire. But you can see here the whole Federal position with the arrival of these 8,000 to 10,000 troops from the north. The whole Federal position has come undone, and they are running. I'm going to continue focusing on artillery. That's a new tactic that I've been using in the last couple of videos. Is really, if you have enemy infantry and enemy artillery in the same place, always fire at the artillery first until the artillery is devastated. One, you can more easily destroy an artillery unit. There's fewer men, they take heavy damage, and it seems easier to cause them to completely rout where the unit goes away from the battlefield entirely. Additionally, captured guns are some of the most valuable pieces because they're so expensive to outfit your own troops. If you can capture guns, it goes a long way toward helping build your own artillery pieces. And in fact, 2 of the 3 batteries of artillery in my second corps are made up entirely of captured Federal pieces. With that being said, the other aspect is you can drive that artillery back. If you sit and trade musketry with enemy infantry, the enemy's first off, the enemy infantry sticks around a lot longer, so you're going to be trading musketry with them and taking damage that whole time. Meanwhile, the artillery is going to fire on you unmolested, and it's going to fire canister into your ranks, which is going to absolutely devastate you. So, in my view, it's always best to take the artillery out. I learned that the hard way in the Battle of Richmond, playing as the Union in my last campaign, where I had 130,000 men attack Richmond and lost 90,000 casualties. I was not focusing on taking the artillery out first. When I replayed the battle, I lost 20,000 casualties and destroyed the Confederates with the exact same army, and it was strictly because I changed my tactics to attacking enemy artillery first. It's even more important, as in that battle, when you're attacking enemy fortified positions, and it was certainly a valuable lesson learned. Meanwhile, you can see here as I'm driving south, things get a little bit chaotic. One of the things I think this game, and I know I've said it a few times, I think I've got 100 plus videos on my channel with Ultimate Generals, so certainly is a game that's almost taken over my channel to some extent, although less so recently, I've really learned how this game, in my opinion, the best thing this game models is the confusion of maintaining an attack. The way that attacks become intermingled with each other, the difficulty in keeping a cohesive and coherent fighting line together as you attack the enemy, the way things can quickly fall apart in terms of your organization. You know, you can stack easily 3 brigades on top of each other if you're not careful, and all of a sudden now only the lead brigade can fight, and you can spend 20 game minutes, not real life minutes, but 20 game minutes in a very limited time battle trying to realign your troops. It doesn't have the sort of fog of war nature that something like Scourge of War does. You really don't often run your general into enemy troops like what happened with Philip Kearny at the Battle of Chantilly. You don't really see running into troops and losing casualties that way by accident in that same sense. I think there could be an opportunity for a little bit more immersion if that was the case, but it certainly still does capture the difficulty of maintaining the impetus of an attack. It really requires you to be very thoughtful about how you advance. You can see here, continuing to advance now. I don't think there's any chance that we lose. It says there's an hour 50 left in this battle, but it's going to be an hour and 50 of us mopping up the enemy, as we have been. If we move over here, you can see one enemy infantry unit. It does look like maybe they're trying to go in around us and take one of these objectives. So I pulled 2 brigades back. The Stonewall Brigade is one of them to try and deal with them. Meanwhile, Hanson's cavalry continues to charge this enemy brigade, which has retreated to the corner of the map. Our cavalry has suffered almost 500 casualties. They've inflicted more than double that. Again, I'm not using them as, oh nice, they captured 1,000 Federal infantry. So they killed 1,000 and captured 1,000, 2,000 casualties inflicted for 400 losses. A hefty butcher's bill, but certainly worth it in my view. This game, I use cavalry in more of a melee fashion, which is more along the Napoleon line, but not so much down the line of really how Civil War battles were fought or how Civil War cavalry was used. I think that's going to be one of the challenges if Ultimate General does decide to go down the Napoleonic route. The combined arms nature of Napoleonic battles was vastly more complex and intriguing in my view. But much more complex than anything that the developers had to solve for in the Civil War. Cavalry has to become an absolute bludgeon and death-dealing weapon in a way that it simply isn't. And it's more than just raising stats, because you got to include a new infantry formation of squares, and frankly, this game doesn't include formations. To this point, you move into column when you march over long distances, you move into line automatically when you approach the enemy. You're going to need a really intelligent computer, an AI in this game, to understand when it should switch between square and line. Most Napoleonic games that I played in the past, such as Breakaway Games, Waterloo, Napoleon's Last Battle, really struggled. They didn't struggle moving to square formation. They did that anytime cavalry approached, but they really struggled moving back away from square formation at the appropriate time. And I think, if you don't add formation controls, which this game does not currently have, to the game, then it's going to be really difficult and frustrating for players if your computer isn't on point. And frankly, adding formation controls to a game that has as simple and intuitive a user interface as it does could prove a challenge to maintain that same feel of the game. With that being said, you can see we have won the Battle of Gaines's Mill. We have 2 career points, which we're going to go ahead and assign. I kind of debating how to assign those points, but where I'm going to end up going with it at the end is I'm going to go ahead and assign them to medicine, because medicine allows you to get a percentage of your troops who are casualties every battle are automatically restored to your units for free. Right now it's 4%, but I just upgraded it to 8. So now, almost 1 out of every 10 soldiers who's a casualty will come back as a free veteran replacement, or whatever experience level they were, which will make replacing my troops much easier. I've already got the politics side to the maximum. Now what I'm going to do here for the next couple of minutes in this video here is sort of reform my troops, in most cases just using green troops, but in any case where there's like a 2-star brigade, I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure we maintain that. So that does mean some veteran replacements. I don't want to drop a 2-star brigade to a 1-star brigade. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes reorganizing my force and preparing it for the next battle, which will be the Battle of Malvern Hill. This is the only case in this game where I see you go from one large battle, one epic or historical battle, which is what Gaines's Mill was, to another, in the case of Malvern Hill, without any subsequent minor battles. It'll be interesting to see how we perform at Malvern Hill, frankly, because it was a Pickett's charge before Pickett's charge. But then again, so was Gaines's Mill. There was a period where the Confederates had an attack of about 30,000 men all go in roughly at the same time in one massive attack. The second day of Gettysburg was one of the other sort of mass attacks like that, and the sort of culminating moment of the Battle of Second Manassas was also like that. The Confederates had attacks like that very often. The Union pretty much never did, at least in the Eastern Theater. But yeah, Malvern Hill will be next, and it'll be an interesting challenge to play as the Confederacy, given the horrible terrain that we're going to have to attack over. I guess since we are 25 minutes into this video and we are approaching sort of the wrap-up point, I do want to talk about the channel going forward and some updates. So I will be doing, at least the plan is to be doing a live stream tomorrow, or actually probably you're going to be viewing this on November 1st. So the intent is to be doing a live stream on my YouTube channel and on my Twitch channel, which will be linked in the description, of the next episode of Single Malt Strategy, my podcast with the strategy wargamer. In that podcast, we'll be looking at the new game out, Bomber Crew. We'll also be looking at the new game, Field of Glory 2. Both of us have had some time to play both of these games. Now, Jean, the strategy wargamer, has had a little bit of a hectic schedule the last few days, so it's possible, if we don't stream it tomorrow, we may push it to Thursday. So that may end up working better. But if we stream it tomorrow, it'll probably be around midnight Central Standard Time. It'll be about an hour. If we don't do it tomorrow, then look for it Thursday, roughly the same time, maybe a little bit earlier. Additionally, I have been playing a lot of Bomber Crew on my channel. That will probably slow down a bit. I'm still going to keep playing it. It's a game that I'm really interested in. It is a lot of fun. It's kind of a fun little time waster, and it's very challenging, and I think a fun sort of cartoony crew management game. But I probably won't be showing quite as many videos of it. I'll be kind of focusing on the operations, probably the ones I'm successful at. I'm debating putting like a best crashes video together or something like that. I think I've had some fun ones. But that'll be slowing down a bit. I'm going to continue Ultimate General Civil War. You can see it's sort of tapered off a bit. I haven't put as many videos out there for Ultimate General as I would like to, so I'll probably return to stream that, sometime this week or early next week. But it won't be an everyday type of thing. I'm going to start mixing in other pieces. I'm enrolled in a multiplayer tournament for Field of Glory 2, so I'm going to be showing that off. The Gettysburg Tide Turns multiplayer series that I was going to be doing with Jean as well is sort of in a dubious state. I showed like the first turn and sort of talked about what the series was going to be, and then like 5 turns into the game, which I haven't shown yet, I was an idiot and hit the resign button, and the game's multiplayer didn't ask me if I was sure I wanted to resign. It just said basically, okay, you resigned, and the multiplayer game ended. So we'll either restart the game with the same sides or switch the sides, or cancel it altogether. I'm not sure. It was a series I said I was going to do that never really got off the ground. Meanwhile, we're just starting a To End All Wars series with XTRG, Tortuga, and myself. After talking about it for what seems like a year, we're looking at getting that series started so that you'll start to see videos of that pop up periodically. And I have another series which I've kind of been talking about, or another discussion point which I've kind of been talking about for maybe a year now, that I'm going to try and get off the ground. It does require I have quite a bit of time to do some editing, some research, a more of a Ken Burns style video that's not strictly looking at gameplay. It's using gameplay to leverage some storytelling. That's really, the gameplay is going to be very much secondary, which I'd like to get off the ground as well. I'm not sure when that'll come, maybe around the Christmas time. I want to make sure that I've got all of the episodes for that series recorded and done before I show any of them, so I can make sure that I stay to a very regular schedule for that series. So more to come with that. So long story short and long-winded way of me saying a little bit less Bomber Command, although it will still be, oh my God, I keep messing up the name. A little bit less Bomber Crew, although I still will continue to show it. A little bit more Ultimate General than we've seen over the last 2 weeks, but less than I was used to do with periodic streams. And then some Field of Glory 2, perhaps some Gettysburg Tide turns. I may mix in some Scourge of War. I like the idea of doing the Union 6-hour campaign or 6-hour battle, fighting the entire Battle of Antietam as the Union and trying to overcoming the Confederates. Maybe showing that, chopping that up and showing that. And then this sort of mystery project that I'm working on. I'm also going to, within the next couple of days, take a look at the new Command Modern Air Naval Operations DLC, Shifting Sands, so look for that as well. And a sort of parting gift or parting topic, just sort of as a refresher, I have been streaming on Twitch and YouTube simultaneously for over a year now. I get more people who watch on YouTube, but the interaction seems to be more valuable on Twitch, and Twitch has a few other neat features that I'd like to give a try to, but I can't do that and stream on both simultaneously. There's certain features or agreements that I have to make Twitch my exclusive streaming platform, so I will probably switch over to streaming just on Twitch sometime in mid-November to the end of the month, and then would just ask that you guys, if that's something you're interested in watching and interacting with, you follow me over there. My link, again, to the game or to my channel will be in the description. If you don't like Twitch or you don't want to go over there or you don't want to watch things over there, it's fine. Everything will get posted over here as a video on demand after the fact. But anyway, guys, that's about all I have for you. I've reformed my army. I've talked to you about the next steps. I've talked to you about the Battle of Gaines's Mill and talked to you about my own tactics in this particular battle. As always, I'm looking for your feedback, your thoughts, your candid criticisms, and your hopes and your dreams. But I think with that said, I will go ahead and leave you with that. We've won the Battle of Gaines's Mill. The Battle of Malvern Hill is next in our Ultimate Generals series. And look for a new episode of Single Malt Strategy, which will be streamed live on both YouTube and Twitch within the next day or two. So either today or tomorrow, generally around 11 o'clock Central Standard Time to midnight Central Standard Time, starting somewhere in that vicinity. I will let you know as soon as I know. Follow me on Twitch, on Twitter if you'd like more information. But with that being said, guys, I hope you've enjoyed my rambling, my musing, and my playing. This is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm out.